everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Today I have a special spotlight with Kaija Heitland. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming on.
So I'm going to geek out just for a minute. I've been watching your work for such a long time. It's commanded a tremendous amount of my attention and equally amount of my admiration for what you do. Kaia, you have layers to you. There's so much going on with your tattooing and all the other things that you do. And I've been watching all the other things. I don't chime in much, but I have so much respect and admiration for your work. So doing this interview was really important to me. And it's such an honor.
That's so lovely for you to say. Thank you, Ned.
Yeah, I definitely see all the things that you have going on. So there's a few things I want to kind of tune into today and dig into with this interview.
Yeah.
But let's start out with your tattooing. So let's, like we did with Marcus, let's go back to the beginning before you ever had a tattoo. What would be some of your earliest memories of getting or seeing a tattoo?
There are a couple of really inciting moments that I can really glom onto that are like some of the reasons that I wanted to become a tattooer, because I never really thought that would ever happen. Especially when you're young, tattooers are like the elite, right? So I never really thought that was going to happen. I went to a sleepover when I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old. And in the goodie bags, they had all of these temporary tattoos. And they were like skulls and snakes and little axes and stuff like that. Like they just got them at the dollar store for a girl's birthday party, which was kind of silly. And I got home from the birthday party, the sleepover, and I put them all on wrong. And they all came off, and I was so upset. I was devastated because I thought it was the coolest thing. And like we grew up in quite a devout religious household. My family's Lutheran, and so tattoos were just not a thing. One of my brothers and I are the only people in our entire family that have tattoos. And my mother was weirdly supportive about it because I was so upset, and she said, "You can draw way nicer than that. Why don't you draw your own tattoos on?" So I took out all my smelly felts and I drew sleeves on myself when I was like 8 years old, of butterflies and snakes and flowers and everything. And I really hope my parents have a photo of that, because I drew like full sleeves on myself when I was a little kid. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And then when Guy Aitchison's book came out, Organica, I think it was 2004, my dad bought me Organica. And again, my parents are not in the tattoo world at all. My dad's actually a biochemist. And he had seen this book and all of the close-ups of like fungal forms and microscopy that Guy was painting in oils and acrylics. And he thought I would love that book. So he got me a copy of Organica.
Is before you ever...
Oh yeah, this was like, these were like inciting moments that made me think like this is something that I could really channel into. And I'd already been really entrepreneurial. Like I started my first business when I was 12. Doing beadwork, and my mom lent me $50 for a beadwork table at a fair at interest. So they taught me all about, owning a small business. So I thought that this was something that I could really do with my art and be independent. Right? So
you're around 14 years old and your dad buys you this book. That is like the coolest thing in the world. Yeah,
and I had it on my bookshelf with all of my Lord of the Rings movie art books, and because I was real nerdy, doing Elvish translations for friends for their tattoos, and it was pretty formative having that book.
And so that early on, that would have set something in your consciousness like right away. And it was sort of a precursor to what you were going to dig into later on. And it's really interesting because your dad planted that seed.
Yeah, and I think that my father had both of my parents, but my father had such an influence on the art that I did because we spent so much time outside. My dad being in the sciences and my parents being so interested in being out in nature. We were camping all the time. We were fishing. We were collecting clams at the beach and harvesting our own food. And they were avid gardeners. And so we grew up in a very wholesome environment that really encouraged us to spend a lot of time outside. So obviously I was going to get into art that really reflected my love of the natural world.
That's right. And so at what point did you actually get a tattoo?
I got a tattoo. My first tattoos I actually got, I have Borneo rosettes on my chest, and I got them when I was in South America, because I finished grade 12 in Canada, and then I got a Rotary scholarship to go study in Peru.
Okay.
And so I lived there for a year. And that's what really incited an interest in getting into the tattoo industry really seriously. Like, I did my first tattoo on myself when I was 13, a little stick and poke, like outline of a raven. And then I just started tattooing my friends because so many of my friends had tattoo machines.
Okay.
And so I had been doing tattoos here and there when I was way too young to be doing tattoos on people.
Sure, yeah.
And so when I moved to South America, I made a bunch of friends, and one of our friends was tattooing in this terrible mall, like a double-story South American mall in the middle of Peru. And so I started doing drawings for him because he was a terrible artist. And so I started doing tattoo drawings for him for very little money so that he could tattoo them on people. So he had a wall of all my sketches, and I was 15 when I moved there. So I was like 15, 16 when I got my first tattoo. He did my my rosettes on me. Yeah. And so I think at that point I really knew that I was going to get into tattooing. So when I moved back to Canada, I was no longer living at home. So I was 16, and I was about to turn 17, and I got a summer job working in a tattoo shop.
Okay.
Just mopping floors, and there was no... I didn't think it was going to turn into an apprenticeship at that point.
And where was home, and what was the shop?
So I was living in Roberts Creek on the Sunshine Coast in a super vibrant artistic community. I got exposed to a lot of really cool psychedelic and a lot of biomech art actually at the time. Like Luke Brown, who's no longer tattooing, is like a really famous visionary artist, and Android Jones and Cody Chancellor, like all of these guys that were doing all these like galactic trading cards and all of this kind of cool underground fringe kind of alongside tattooing psychedelic art. And Guy Aitchison was really involved in that community too.
Yeah.
The first collab I ever did with Guy, and I don't know if he knows, I did a Elvis translation for one of his galactic trading cards in like 2009.
Okay.
And so I was part of this really weird kind of fringe artistic community.
Yeah.
And the tattoo shop that I started working at was Six Gill Tattoos, and it was in Seashell. Yeah.
Donovan Murphy.
Donovan Murphy owns it now, yeah.
Okay, somebody else had...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I started working there in 2007, again with my dates. I tried to look through photos before this interview so that I could try to get a little bit of a timeline. So the end of 2006, 2007-ish,
Sure.
I think is when I started working there. And Piotr Barker owned the shop at the time, and Sean Headley was working there. And Louise Blackstone as well was working there kind of intermittently. So I picked up a little bit of slack doing line drawings and making stencils and things like that. And I think that they just realized that I was a bit of an asset.
Yeah.
So Piotr decided to apprentice me, even though I was still very young. And then he decided that he wanted to sell the shop, and he sold the shop to Jesse Young.
Okay.
So I got sold along with the shop. My apprenticeship got sold to Jesse, and I had the amazing privilege to be able to apprentice under Jesse.
So half of your apprenticeship was with him, and then the other half was Jesse Young. Yes.
I divide my apprenticeship into thirds.
Okay.
And I'll talk about the next shop that I worked at after that. But I worked under Jesse until 2010, I believe. I worked at the next shop, which I'll get into. But the reason I feel so fortunate is that I started tattooing where there were still these last vestiges of really traditional apprenticeships. Mm-hmm. So as much as I was treated with this kind of newfound kindness and respect that was being shown to apprentices in the industry, I was still given a very traditional apprenticeship. Jesse was a machine builder. Mm-hmm. I built the needles for the shop. I was still making needles. Jesse taught me, and Jesse and Piotr taught me both of those things. And I learned about mixing ink. We were still using steel tubes and stuff, so of course I still did all of the sterilization and the scrubbing for the shop. But I remember Piotr telling me that he wanted his mags to look like they had been made by the hand of Jesus.
Okay.
So that was kind of the bar for those, for his mags.
So Jesus was a good mag maker.
Apparently.
Okay.
I mean, carpenter, but apparently he had some other skills.
He's good at soldering too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was super fortunate to have like a very strong grounding in my apprenticeship with them. We did a lot of conventions really early on. I was doing conventions in Saskatoon and Regina, very old school conventions, put on by the Red and White Social Club and stuff. So a very different environment for a young woman to come into when I was, 17, 18. Like I was still underage when I was doing some of these conventions, and there was still a very old school mentality going on. Like we were still scrubbing tubes at the convention. Everybody was using steel tubes. And me and some of the other apprentices, Dan Fletcher was apprenticing at the same time.
Okay.
And I remember he and I would have to scrub tubes, and our teachers would kind of rent us out to other tattooers to scrub their tubes too. So we'd be in a banquet hall, and then this tube scrubbing room was just another banquet hall with one of those plastic tub mudroom sinks with a 5-gallon bucket underneath to catch the water, and you were scrubbing a basin of tubes just in fluid. It was pretty intense. Yeah.
Wow. But that sounds like a classic thing that an apprentice at that time
100%.
would do. It's like, okay, you're scrubbing tubes for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, like, and it's nothing that I would ever complain about. I love being able to have that.
Yeah.
Because I know even around my age, there aren't a lot of people who came into tattooing who got to do any of that stuff. And I think, one of the things that makes my work what it does is that I had such a grounding in really traditional tattoo work, like very strong line work, very high contrast. Primary lessons that I ever had, I was doing a lot of floral and fauna and stuff like that, because being the only woman in several of the tattoo shops I worked in, I got that work. But I was always adamant that everything had to have a solid outline, everything had to have good contrast. Lettering was definitely something that I focused on. So that built a really good base for later on doing really big tattoos, where I still did them very solidly. Like that, those are the building blocks of those tattoos still. So,
that's fascinating. and I always find that women have such a beautiful finesse with their work, and there was at that time there wasn't near amount of women in the trade at that time.
No.
How did it feel like coming in as a female into a male dominated scene?
I didn't know any better, honestly. And it didn't even really occur to me until I started working at my second shop. I got to, I think in 2010, I started working for Clint Danroth at Craftsman.
Okay.
And I think Clint, I've talked about this in other interviews, Clint taught me more about the industry than absolutely anybody. That guy knows more about marketing and hustle than anybody else I know, and I was so privileged to work underneath him because I have such a strong work ethic. It was so cool to have another tattooer really encourage that instead of a lackadaisical approach to tattooing as an artist. Coming into it very much less as a tattoo artist and way more of a tattooer.
Okay.
I've always called myself a tattooer. I'm not a tattoo artist. I do art that I tattoo on people, but I'm a tattooer. And so when I started working there, it was really interesting. And one of the other aspects of my apprenticeship that was also very traditional was that there were only certain shops that I was going to be allowed to work at after I left Jesse's. And those 3 shops were John's shop, the Dutchman, Sacred Heart, and Clint's.
Sure.
And so I didn't write to Clint and ask him for a job. Jesse called Clint and asked him if he would take on the responsibility of me as a young tattooer and take on my apprenticeship, basically, in my year 2, 3, 4, or whatever it was, right? And so that introduction into being in a new shop and having kind of had a placement there rather than me applying for a job was an interesting way to get into it. I really respect the way that was done. Yeah.
Well, and Clint has quite a lineage to him. He first started out with Rob Thomas, and then he was over at the Dutchman. So, and he saw a few different worlds while he was growing up in tattooing. So he would sort of bring all of that into your apprenticeship or finishing off your apprenticeship.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that was really hammered into me too, was like understanding the privilege that I had because of my lineage. With Jesse especially, like he really tried to intimate the importance of where he came from and that that cultural, that artistic inheritance that he came from, from Alberta, from Edmonton, and working with, you know, Danny Gordy and Ink Machine, and then going to the Dutchman, and then coming to the Sunshine Coast, and that him owning his first shop after he'd been tattooing for 10 years.
That's right.
You know, and how important that was, and that, you know, they firmly believed that nobody should be owning a tattoo shop if they had been working for less than that amount of time. So those are values that were really strongly instilled in me, and knowing that I was, you know, the tattoo granddaughter of, you know, who I consider my grandfathers in tattooing, you know, Danny Gordy and John. And I've talked to John about this, and he really loved that idea too. When I talked to him about it, I think he really appreciated that being so young, I still had that sense of lineage. And so when I went to work for Clint, that was very reinforced as well. Yeah. Clint's, the inheritance that he brought to training me as well. Yeah.
So this is like lining all the ducks in a row for me, because there was this sense of awe, reverence, admiration for your work. It has to be influenced by what's behind you in the work. All the shoulders that you lean on when you lean on the client, all those shoulders are leaning into you. And like, I think that must be where all this admiration that I have for you comes from. You know, it's really cool. I'm so stoked to hear, you know, how things unfolded for you.
Well, this is such a cool way to be interviewed too, because these aren't things that necessarily come up when people talk to tattooers about their art. Like the project that you're doing is so important because it creates all of those links. It talks about how we all influence each other. Nobody exists in a vacuum in this. You know, and one of the things that I reflect on was how much pressure I actually put myself under, because there was, even if there wasn't an overt expectation from my tattoo family, I put a lot of pressure on myself because there was no way that I was going to end up being a bad tattooer. Like, I could not deal with that disappointment. Like, I had to be a really good tattooer.
Yeah. And so when you're with Clint Danroth and you're tattooing at this point?
Yes. And the full time.
How was that going? Was your style really starting to take off and develop?
It was, yeah, absolutely. There were great influences at that shop. I was working with a couple of young guys, Dan Thompson and Kai Saunders at the time, who were very young tattooers as well. So there was a lot of small work. It was a very busy shop. And I also worked with Rob Hope was there, and Dave Allen, who was obviously a really strong influence on me as well. Both Dave and Rob, having them at the shop, really steered the way that I continued in the industry afterwards. Yeah, their influence was very impactful.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Both of those guys.
Well, all three of them in Clint, you know, they've got such strong ideals and such strong, like, morality, really strong values and a very strong impression of what they want tattooing to continue to be, right? So that really helped me form how I felt about the industry. Yeah.
Now, when you started at Craftsman, was this Craftsman on Hastings or White Rock?
No, this was White Rock when we were on the beach underneath the Washington Avenue Grill.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a great shop. Apparently, super haunted building. All of our scissors would get stolen all the time. Okay. The electrical was crazy. Clint insisted on, I don't know if you know Clint well enough to know this. He refuses to let anybody do anything. He does everything himself. I once remember him changing a light fixture, and he didn't want to turn the power off, so he just held one hand behind his back while he changed a live light fixture. Yeah. Like, stuff like that all the time.
Yeah, I'm terrible at turning the power off. You should just touch one thing at a time. You're fine.
Yeah, totally fine. You just don't complete the circuit.
Don't ever touch two.
Yeah, right?
There you go.
So, like, watching the different way that, Jesse and Pia and Clint, the way that they ran their shops, really encouraged, really kind of solidified my idea that I probably never wanted to own a tattoo shop.
Okay.
Yeah. I was happy being a tattooer under other people for a really long time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, and again, when I left Craftsman, Clint, there was only so many shops again that it would be appropriate for me to move to. And my two options were Sacred Heart and John's shop.
Okay.
And at that time, I wasn't super familiar with the people who were working at John's shop, and it was really out of the way. And I was working in White Rock, 3 or 4 days a week, and then commuting back to the Sunshine Coast. I was commuting like 5 hours each way and then on the ferry. And so I was doing that trip twice a week, and I just couldn't go all the way out to John's shop. I wanted something a little bit closer. And so I started working at Sacred Heart. Clint made the introduction to Dave Green. And I started working there. I'm actually not sure what year, but I worked there for 9 years.
Okay. How long were you at Craftsman for?
I was at Craftsman for 3, I believe.
Okay. Then I can do the math on
that. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And then, so I started working for the illustrious Dave Green, the elegant and illustrious Dave Green.
Yeah.
And that was the shop on Granville and Nelson, across from the Moose there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Dave's work too. Like,
oh, fantastic. Yeah.
I remember when we did our interview, like I was telling him how when I look at his work, it creates a story. There's a narrative that comes up in me, and it's like, and I get lost in the narrative just looking at his artwork. Yeah,
he's a total storyteller.
And then he said, like, yeah, Ned, that's it. That's exactly it. I create the narrative. The narrative drives the image. Absolutely. Yeah,
there's an elegance and like there's a bit of an effortlessness to it too. Like I've seen him get very stressed out about tattoos, but when you watch him tattoo, it just, he tattoos very naturally. Yeah.
Another tattooist that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, Dave Green.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And, talking about like tattoo industry cultural inheritance, that's a guy who's seen a lot of changes in the industry and taught me a huge amount about, especially tattoo history in Vancouver, which like central Vancouver, which is something that I hadn't necessarily known a lot about.
Yeah.
So working at that shop, which was, my ultimate goal really, like when I was at Six Gill, I had always wanted to work at Sacred Heart. And so I had a small farm on the Sunshine Coast, and I commuted every single day.
Yeah.
For the first 5 years that I worked at 5 years that I worked at Sacred Heart, I commuted every day on the ferries. So I spent, 3, 4, 5 hours commuting every single day, waking up, catching the first ferry, getting the last ferry home, to work there because it was that important to me. To work for him and to work for that shop.
Sure.
Working at Sacred Heart, I got to actually indulge myself and rekindle this love for biomech that had been, that seed that had been planted by my dad and that exposure to Guy Aitchison. And so working in a really busy shop like that, where I was booked up, for a couple of years at some points, inadvisedly, nobody should do that to themselves. That allowed me, like I said, the luxury to indulge something as obscure and niche as biomech, which I was advised strongly against doing by everybody I talked to. I got really excited. I was like, I'm going to get into biomech. The 90s are back. Like, I'm totally going to do this. I was so excited about it. And I started drawing it, and everybody I talked to, they're like, this is career suicide.
Okay.
Why would you do this? Nobody wants biomech. There's like one person in Canada doing biomech. Or like two, like full time at the time. And I'm like, no, this is going to have a resurgence. So about 10 years ago, I started getting really interested in it and just kind of started drawing forms, started drawing shapes. started like going back to Guy's work and looking at all of those like macro shots that he had done and really examining like where those forms in biomech came from. So my stuff wasn't really biomech with like the swords and the spikes and, you know, all these bulbous forms that we see in that really like 90s, 2000s biomech. I started to see the relationship between the way that biomech was laid out and the way that Art Nouveau works.
Okay.
And those two things follow all of the same rules.
Okay, yeah.
Right? So anatomy is foremost, layout is foremost, flow and counterflow and all of those things that I was already so familiar with from doing really elegant Art Nouveau inspired work, or Art Nouveau informed work, really, because it's not inspired, it's informed by the same rules.
That's right.
Helped me to kind of develop this style that I was actually able to convince people to get tattooed, right?
Sure, yeah.
So...
And so this would be the time period when your friendship with Aaron Kane sort of sparked up?
Aaron. Aaron's fantastic. He has a little bit of a reputation for being a bit of a curmudgeon, but for some reason, he and I get on, pardon the expression, like a house on fire. I don't use that one very much.
Yeah.
But Aaron and I started communicating online many years ago, just because I loved his work so much, and I started collecting his machines very early too, because I was still using traditional machines until like a few years ago, so we just started conversations online. I would design jewelry, and I would send him sketches of jewelry, and we had all these ideas for collaborations. But because he was in Grass Valley in Northern California, it was a little bit hard to actually plan it out. But we did a lot of like drawing back and forth and planning stuff that never got done. And then I had the opportunity, I was visiting some friends, my friends Nick and Ellen Chaboya down in Marin County. I used to go down a couple of times a year and spend time with them. And so I did a little road trip and took the train up to go visit Aaron and stayed at his place for a couple of weeks with his lovely wife, Christine. And I stayed with them and we built machines together. And so I got to work in his shop, and I already had a background in silversmithing because I've been pursuing that on the side for the last 25 years. And so he was really excited about the wire wrap biomech work that I'd done. And it's so funny, I started doing biomech silver jewelry before I ever did biomech tattoo work.
Okay.
And again, with that fringe hippie kind of arts community, wire wrapping was really, really popular, right?
Yeah.
In like the festival scene. So I got into that, and that was such a natural fit with what Aaron was doing, because I would never criticize anything Aaron does. But to me, when I looked at that stuff, I was like, it deserves an embellishment. You know what I mean? Like there's something so jewelry-esque and regal about some of the work that he does, and I wanted to like bedazzle it.
Well, yeah, it's like adding
Right.
3-dimension to 3-dimension.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Yeah.
And so like I just saw where there was a window where I could jump in there and not interfere with what he'd already done, right? So I mean, a lot of people have seen them, but Aaron and I did a set of machines. He and I each own one. I have the shader and he has the liner, and we carved the uprights of these frames out of solid blocks of silver. So we completely sculpted them out of solid blocks of silver and then drilled out contact points, and I went in with Ethiopian opals and silver work and did this jewelry-esque biomech work on top of it. And it worked beautifully. I think there's some of the most beautiful things that I've ever gotten to work on, but it was such an opportunity because I hadn't done any machine building since I'd worked with Jesse, but I still worked on all my own machines, having that education. So, and I built a few machines here and there with other people, but I have a very intense tattoo machine collection that I don't use anymore, but I probably have about 20 Aaron Canes.
Yeah.
At least.
Well, I had an Aaron Kane liner many years ago, and man, did that thing smoke the lines in.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Oh, it's just like, it was like butter, you know.
I always use Aaron's liners for black and gray. They make, like, I always loved using like a super fast punchy liner for putting in black and gray. Like even Big Mags. And so, yeah, that's primarily what I use with Aaron Kane liners for pretty much all my tattooing. And then I had some really beautiful...
Oh, you just open up the liner a bit and put a mag?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Kaia, it's been such a pleasure. I know this this little spotlight here just touches the fringes of... and it just peels back maybe one of the layers. And if you guys want to see the rest of the layers of Kaia, I think you're going to have to get the book, and you'll see all the layers in the book. We'll certainly flesh those out in that.
It was an absolute privilege to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick.